I'm Ron Patterson with Utah State University Extension in Carbon County. Today we're going to talk about soil and soil preparation for our gardens. The soil and the water are the most critical components in growing a successful garden. Here in the eastern part of Utah, we have some especially difficult soil challenges in that we have either a high pH, well we do have a high pH in both the soil and the water, or we may even have some salty soils. So it's always a good idea to have the soil tested before you try to have a garden and make sure that that's going to be successful, at least in that way. So what we'll do first is show you how to do a soil sample. You can take a soil sample and send it up to the university. A routine test up there is $14. It's a pretty cheap option to kind of figure out what you're going to do with your soil, whether or not you can actually grow a garden where you're thinking. The easiest way to take a soil sample is to get a probe, just a tube basically you shove down into the ground, takes a core sample, you pull that out. You could go and get one from the extension office in your county if you need to. But if you don't have access to a probe or you don't want to drive into the office, you can use a shovel. What you do is take out a divot there about a shovel depth, 8 or 10 inches deep. Now that I've got that out of the way, I will shave off the backside of that divot. Okay, so now that we've got the backside of that divot pulled out, we want to make that a fairly even width down our spade blade. We peel that off to the side so we've got a good consistent sample down the depth of the soil. Put that into a bucket. Do that 5 or 6 more times, and then we just mix up the bucket, mix up the soil in there. You get a kit from the extension office, has a bag and a box. You put your soil into the bag, get that pretty well filled up. That's not full, but get that filled up. Put your box together. Put your full bag in there. You might want to let that dry out just a little bit before you put it in. Give it a day or so to dry, and then close it off. Send that up to the university. The instructions on where to send it and all that are right on the box. You can send that up. You can send your check in a separate envelope if you want. It'll be a little bit cheaper for mailing. So that's how you do a soil sample. Do that in about 5 or 6 places around your garden, and as long as your soil is fairly consistent within your garden area, you'll have a good analysis come back to you as far as what you've got. It'll tell you your pH, your salinity, the phosphorus and the potassium, and also the texture. So soil sample is always a good first step if you're going to try to grow something. Now once you've got your soil sample back and you realize that you've got a soil that's good enough to grow something in, especially here in southeast Utah, we have some pretty tough soils to deal with and very, very low organic matter. So it's always a good idea to add some composted organic matter. You don't want to add uncomposted like wood chips or something like that that hasn't been uncomposted, because that'll tie up your nitrogen. Once it's been composted though, it'll break down within the soil and help create a good soil structure. And so basically you can get some horse manure, cow manure. Not a bad idea to get that tested too if you're afraid that you might have a little bit high salts in that. Spread it out every year. If you put a couple inches of compost on your garden, that will go a long ways towards helping the soil structure, and also organic matter tends to decrease the pH a little bit, so you can actually lower the pH a little bit by adding a lot of organic matter. So a couple inches of organic matter will help. So you just spread that out over your garden. A couple inches deep. Now, fertilizer is also a critical part of what we're doing in gardening, and so you want to make sure that you add some fertilizer to your garden, because nitrogen is a very volatile element, and it is used up, it volatilizes into the air, it leaches down with the water. So we always assume that nitrogen is going to have to be added to our soil to have a good crop. The rule of thumb on the fertilizer is, well, once you get your soil sample back, you'll know on the phosphorus and potassium whether you need to add that or not. But the rule of thumb for the nitrogen is about 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per year. Now, you have to kind of go through some math to figure that part out, because on the bag it tells you how much nitrogen is in the fertilizer. Like if it's a 20-20-20 fertilizer, it's got 20% nitrogen, 20% phosphorus, and 20% potassium. So if we want to have a pound, let's say 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, well, to get 2 pounds of nitrogen, we have to have 10 pounds of fertilizer. So the math that you would do to come up with that is, if you want to have 2 pounds of nitrogen, 20% of the bag is nitrogen, you divide 2 by 0.2, which is 20%, and you come up with 10. So you have to have 10 pounds of the fertilizer to get 2 pounds of nitrogen on 1,000 square feet. So generally speaking, your fertilizer will be approximately a pound of fertilizer in a pint. That will vary depending on the density of the nitrogen. Ammonium sulfate is a little heavier. Some of these that are prilled a little bit will be a little bit lighter, so kind of take that into account. But about a pound to a pint will give you however many pounds you need. So if you need 10, you need to have 10 pints of fertilizer over a 1,000 square foot garden. That'll get you your 2 pounds of nitrogen. Now, it's not a bad idea to spread that out over the year. So you may put half of it on at the beginning of the season, and then another half on as the crops are growing really good, and you water that down in. So you don't want to necessarily put it all down at once, but you do want to get that much down at least. You could go up a little bit higher depending on the crop. If it's a leafy vegetable crop, it could go a little higher. Corn takes quite a bit of fertilizer. So kind of depends on the crop. So if you want specifics, you could go and look at some fact sheets at the extension website. There are fact sheets on all these different vegetables, and they have fertilizer recommendations on there. So that's what you need to do for fertilizer and organic matter. And now we'll get into working the soil up. They say that gardening is good exercise, and here's where part of the exercise can come in. If you just have a small garden, say 400 square feet, a 20 by 20 size garden, it's probably not worth your time to invest in, or your money to invest in a tiller of some sort. It's pretty quick and easy to just kind of turn up the soil like that. Get your organic matter turned down. You get it wet with the organic matter in there, and the worms will come and help to get that good and distributed. Doesn't take a whole lot. So you could do a 400 square foot garden in an hour or less. So that's one way of turning the soil. You get a little bit bigger, or if you like to have your power tools, you can buy a tiller. Those little 2-cycle engine type tillers will do a good job of stirring the soil down about 5-6 inches, about as deep as they typically will go. Or you could get a larger 4-stroke engine tiller that can dig it down 6 to 8 inches. So basically you're just trying to get that organic matter in there. Some philosophies are that you shouldn't ever dig up the soil. You shouldn't touch it with the tiller or with the spade or with the garden fork like this. Well, that kind of depends, because your soil type would make a difference in that. Your climate would make a big difference. If you're in a fairly high rainfall area with lots of organic matter, that probably would work okay. But here in southeast Utah, we've got this heavy clay soil, and we need to add the organic matter down into it. And so it's just a better management practice to turn the soil. Keep in mind that when you till it up, you're going to lose some of your topsoil moisture. So that's one thing to kind of think about. We don't have a lot of moisture around here. So get it turned, get your crop planted, Or if you wanted to turn it in the fall, get that organic matter turned down in the fall and get your, let the winter moisture soak down into the ground, then that's a pretty good way to do it as well. Keep in mind with our spring winds here, you can get a lot of erosion on bare soil. So that's one way to turn your garden, or you can use a tiller. A lot of times you get a little bit of a clod build up there. You want to bust those down a little bit and rake your garden smooth. The easiest way to do that is kind of use your rake like a broom. If you push and pull like this, it kind of gouges up and down. It's a little harder to keep it smooth. So if you've got some clods in there, you want your soil to be moist but not soggy. If it's dry, you'll have clods, and if it's wet, you'll have clods. So this breaks up pretty good. Now I've got a pretty good bed there to work with. Do the same thing. If we've tilled the ground, we can smooth it out with a rake. Now if you've got a big area, that's a lot of raking to do. So if your garden's a little bit bigger, here's a little trick that I like to do, and I'll show you my ground smoothing method that I use on my big gardens. All right, so what I do is I just get a 4x4 pallet, put a little bit extra weight on it, and this is where I get some of my exercise. Just little pallet, smooth out the ground. So here we have a good seed bed. We're ready to go plant our garden.